self-expression. Okay. This does not mean that I conceive of the self necessarily in terms of the logic of objects. So this is quite complicated philosophical speak. What is he saying there? He says that when we talk about a self, we normally think of this entity here that's peering out into the world. What he called about the logic of objects, he talked about different logics, and one of the logics we use is these logic of objects, and this is when we're in this mode of viewing the world as an objective reality. And we have a certain logic that's associated with that, so we can deal with that world. And then by that very nature, he says he's not talking about this small self that's manipulating this logic to make do in this world of this objectified reality. He goes on to say something more. He says it, and now I said the self with a capital S, and to distinguish it from the small self that we normally conceive ourselves to be. And this is what he says, is rather a singular centre of absolute presence, or present, that includes in itself the eternal past and future. Okay, so that there is no linear progression. This self, or this one mind, if Schrödinger were using his terminology, is this notion of absolute present that includes the eternal past and the future, includes all time. This is why I call the self a momentary self-determination of the absolute present. So this is once again quite difficult philosophical speak, but this resonates, I feel, with what Zen Master Dogen was saying at Uji when he was talking about each moment. Now, you reflect on whether there's anything outside of that. Can be anything outside of that. And then he describes it quite poetically, and the world of the absolute present is the sphere with infinite radius and no circumference. So there is no border, infinite radius, which has a centre everywhere. So this is how he's describing, this is Nishida's words, or what you can say is clarification of what Schrödinger, or what I understand Schrödinger's one mind to be. And also what Zen Master Dogen is talking about being time. Okay? And this text is significant because Nishida was not just a philosopher. So philosophers usually and quite often use their intellects in order to develop their philosophies. Apparently D.T. Suzuki was one of the first Japanese to talk about Zen to the West after World War II. And he knew Nishida. And indeed, in Suzuki's writings, he claimed that Nishida, in his Zen training, had an enlightenment experience. So it's my feeling that where Nishida's philosophy was coming, wasn't coming from his intellect. It was coming from his direct experience of this being time, this direct experience of one mind. And this was framed in terms of this rather convoluted language of the absolute, what he called about the absolute present. Now, Nishida's students, one of them particularly complained to Nishida because he said that you need to be able to write these things in a more accessible way so that Western philosophers or Orthodox philosophers can follow it. And Nishida was reluctant because he felt that he needed to develop his own sort of mode of expression, his own concepts, in order to try and express something that fundamentally is, as Zen Master Guangbo says, a wordless understanding, because it's based on direct experience. As soon as we start to put it in words, those words aren't the experience. Okay, so, and many of the sacred texts and many masters are like this, that when they Zen Master Dogen was like this as well. If you notice some of his texts, time flows into today, flows into today, today flows into tomorrow. It doesn't make sense for the normal logical mind. And these masters, they write this way deliberately so that our intellectual mind struggles with it, I believe. Because if we can understand it easily, if our intellect can understand it easily, then we won't be able to penetrate to the depths that's underneath the words. Okay? So here's just some more sort of summary points about Nishida. that came out of this chapter that I wrote. So Nishida argues that the dichotomy of space and time obtains from the standpoint of the self. So this is this principle of objectivation, this logic of objects. Once we're in that mode, we get this dichotomy between space and time. Okay, so that's a very natural consequence of when we're in this, when we're I guess, activating this principle of objectivation. Space and time become separate things. Subject-object duality arises. And this dichotomy is transcended when these time space unite, and this is another of his strange expressions, a contradictorily self-indexical point of view. So translated into what we saw earlier, this is how he's referring to the one mind of Freudian or being time of Zen Master Dogen. And then this unification, this is a very, very important, it should not be seen as being outside of reality. Right, so I mean, if we're imagining here, I would like to experience something like that, we're imagining something out there, some point in the future that might happen to me if I meditate long enough, if I do certain things. We cannot. He says this is not outside of any sort of reality. Because when the self determines itself to be the absolute present, so when it's this one mind, then the self is none other than the reality. And this is the essence of being time. This is the reality. This is the only reality. So Master Dogen said there's nothing outside of that, even time. And this reality paradoxically manifests as a borderless space in which seemingly distinct phenomena have no separation, and as a timeless now, which paradoxically also includes time. So that's so in summary, the argument that I'm putting forward is in this Nishita's notion of absolute present. It is at, or as, more specifically, more directly, more precisely, as that absolute present, experienced directly. This is where Schrödinger and Dogen and Nishida converge. That's the end of my talk. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Peter. Are you happy to take questions from everybody? Okay, your turn.
What do you suppose Nishida was referring to when he talked about in the previous slide that 11 syllable thing, quotation marks, that one, self-indexical. He's talked about the point of view. The view is how does the self-index itself? I'm just trying to get my head around that.
Yeah, you see,
self-indexical.
Yeah, so this is, as I said, this is where Nishida developed his own language around these topics. And what,
and this is a translation.
It's contrary. So self-indexical. So if we think that there are these individual cells out there. So then if they are separate, we can start to index them. We give them names, right? So we can refer to them as but this is a contradiction. So that such a thing is not the reality. And this is what I think that he is getting at here. But his texts maybe not obscure, but enigmatic. And so you need to read larger portions, and sometimes around what you read you start to get a sense of what he's saying. But also the other thing is, I think it's really important with Nishida and also Zen Master Dogen to have a meditative experience or practice to go with it, and because the intellect won't give you the full understanding of what he's getting at. So it was a roundabout answer to your question, but I hope maybe that it went somewhere.
No, the whole.
Yep.
If, as you say, we all have this sense of time as being a series of hours, that's reinforced by our own sense of mortality. There is a next which I
Yeah.
self-didn't exist, and there's another next
Yeah.
when I want to be. So are we locked? I don't ever hope to escape that person. At my age, I don't hope to escape that. But are you saying there's a possibility that if one could escape that sense of having a defined number of nows
Yeah.
in our personal existence, you could escape that, you would then maybe be able to comprehend the possibility of one mind. In other words, it's beyond the average person to do it, but it's a possibility that it could be done,
Well,
which we accept on some sort of faith.
Well, it's the so the distinction is, so normally when we're in this mode where we have the sense of self, our I that's persisting through time, and then this is the thing that essentially is afraid to die. It wants to it really is deeply rooted centre stage in all of us, and spends a lot of energy and a lot of time to stay there. And that's in my experience in Zen training and things like that. So much of these intensive meditation retreats is actually dealing with that particular phenomenon. But then it can step aside. And a lot of so a lot of the intensive Zen training methods are actually really quite smart devices to tire that thing out until the point where it tires and it steps aside. And then the distinction is, before that you think you're an entity in reality, but then the experience is you are the reality. That's it. You are the reality, just as Nishida said. So that this borderless, spaceless, direct experience is life itself. And this is not only in Zen, but many meditative traditions and other spiritual or mystical traditions, this is essentially at the core of much of what they're trying to bring across. So it's a really important homework for all of us